I still remember that day like it happened yesterday. I was sitting on my porch, the sun barely touching the fields behind my farm, the golden light brushing over rows of corn and wheat. Everything felt calm, peaceful, the kind of silence that makes you think nothing could ever go wrong. My dog Max was napping at my feet, and the wind carried the faint smell of fresh hay. I was humming to myself, just enjoying the quiet, when my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just another routine call. But the second buzz made me sit up. It was my cousin Lisa. She sounded breathless, almost panicked. "You won't believe this," she said. "They sent the wedding invites to your farm." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "What do you mean?" "Who sent what to my farm?" Lisa's voice trembled. 200 wedding invitations. They all have your address on them. And no one told you?" I froze. My stomach sank. My farm address being used for 200 invitations. Without asking me? My mind started racing. I tried to picture how this could happen. Did someone make a mistake? Was it a prank? But then a strange, sinking feeling told me it was something worse. I didn't even know which family member had done this, but whoever it was, they hadn't bothered to tell me. By mid-afternoon, the calls began. Neighbors, delivery people, even strangers who had RSVP'd, all arriving at my gate. I could hear the muffled voices of confused guests walking around the farmhouse. Max barked wildly, his tail stiff, sensing my tension. Every knock on the door, every honk of a car made my heart race faster. The serene calm of my farm had shattered into a buzzing chaos. I tried to call my cousin back to get answers, but she was already panicking herself. I don't know what to do. What if people show up? What if she stopped mid-sentence and I could hear the faint sound of laughter in the background? Someone on the other end was mocking her, and it made the hairs on my neck stand up. That's when I saw the first car pull in. A red SUV packed with people carrying flowers, gifts, and dresses. They looked confused, excited, and completely unaware that they were about to crash someone else's life. I ran to the porch, waving my hands, but they didn't notice me. My heart pounded. The calm farm, the quiet fields, and the soft chirping birds now felt like a trap closing in around me. I still couldn't believe it. Arlene Line invitations. 200. That meant hundreds of people could show up. My quiet life, my farm, my sanctuary was suddenly turned into a wedding venue without my permission. And the worst part? I had no idea who was behind it. I walked through the house, my mind spinning, trying to figure out a plan. The invitations were printed, the addresses written neatly. Who in my family would do this? And why would they think it was okay to use my address without asking me first? The more I thought about it, the more I felt a burning mix of anger, confusion, and fear. Then I heard a whisper outside the window. Someone was talking quietly, almost secretively, in the bushes near the barn. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded deliberate. My heart skipped a beat. Was it someone from the wedding party, or worse, someone plotting something I couldn't imagine yet? I grabbed my coat, my phone, and stepped outside slowly. The cool breeze hit my face, carrying the scent of wet soil. The whispering stopped. The SUV had parked closer to the barn. I could see people moving around, carrying tables, chairs, and decorations. Panic rose in me like fire. How was I supposed to explain this? How was I supposed to stop it? And then, just as I was about to call for help, I noticed something chilling. On the ground near the gate, a single envelope. My handwriting. No, it wasn't mine. The address was my farm, but the sender was anonymous. I picked it up with trembling hands. Inside was a note, written in messy, hurried letters. "We're counting on you not to ruin the surprise." My heart stopped. My farm, my life, had just become the centerpiece of something I had no control over. And I still had no idea what was about to happen next. From that moment on, I knew nothing would ever feel safe on my farm again. The quiet days were gone. The wind, the fields, the birds, they all seemed to whisper warnings now. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of a story I couldn't yet understand. But what I didn't know then was that those 200 invitations were only the start of a chaos that would completely turn my life upside down. I still remember that night when the sun had finally set and the shadows from the trees stretched long and thin across my farm. The fields that once looked so peaceful now seemed like a maze, full of secrets waiting to trap me. I could still hear Max whining at the back door, his ears perked up and his tail stiff. Something in the air felt wrong. The day had been chaotic, with cars, strangers, and that anonymous note. But nothing could have prepared me for what was about to come. I paced through the farmhouse, my mind racing. I tried calling my cousin, again hoping she could shed some light on who had done this, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice shaking more than I wanted to admit. I explained that strangers were showing up at my farm, that decorations were being unloaded, and that I had no clue what was happening. I begged her to call back, but there was no answer. My heart sank even lower. The night air grew colder as I stepped outside to inspect the farm. I shined my flashlight across the yard. There, near the barn, I could see a group of people whispering. They were moving quickly, carrying chairs, tables, and large boxes. When they noticed me, they froze, and I felt the weight of 100 unspoken questions pressed down on me. Who were they? Why were they here? And why didn't anyone care that this was my farm? I took a deep breath and walked closer, trying to get a better look. I could see the bride-to-be clearly now, dressed in a simple white top and long skirt, arranging the flowers with help from what looked like bridesmaids. They smiled and waved at me as if I were supposed to be part of this, but I had no idea what to say. My lips went dry, my hands started shaking, and a cold anger began to rise in me. My farm, my sanctuary, had been turned into someone else's party without a single word from the people who were supposed to care about me. I turned to the barn, hoping to find some clue. Inside, I noticed stacks of invitations unopened and more boxes filled with tablecloths, ribbons, and decorations. Someone had clearly planned this for weeks, maybe even months. They had carefully prepared everything while I had been completely left out. My mind struggled to understand why anyone would do this. I remembered the note. "We're counting on you not to ruin the surprise." I didn't even know what that meant. Was this supposed to be a joke? Or something worse? Then I heard a car pull up behind the farmhouse. I froze. The engine's growl echoed across the fields, and my heart jumped. I knew it wasn't another guest. The red SUV and other cars were already here. This one was different. It was sleek, black, almost too quiet. A man stepped out. His face was hidden in shadows, and he walked slowly, deliberately, toward the barn. I had never seen him before. Every step he took made the air feel heavier. Like the calm I had once taken for granted was being replaced by something dark. Something I couldn't control. I tried to call someone for help, but my phone slipped from my hands. I bent down to pick it up, and when I looked up, he was gone. Just like that, vanished into the darkness. My chest tightened. My breathing grew shallow, and I realized that I was completely alone in handling whatever this was. My farm, which I had always believed was my safe place, had become a stage for a story I didn't understand. I went back inside and tried to calm myself. I stared out the window at the decorations, at the people who were still arranging everything as if nothing was wrong. But something felt off. The way they laughed, the way they whispered, there was a strange tension under the surface. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. My instincts screamed at me to lock the doors, hide, and call for help. But I also knew that if I did that, I might never get answers. Hours passed and the farm grew quieter. Most of the people had left temporarily to grab food or help with more preparations. I finally allowed myself a moment to sit down and think. Who had sent these invitations? Who had planned this elaborate surprise? And why did they feel it was okay to use my farm without asking? I could feel the anger simmering inside me, but it was mixed with fear. The shadows in the yard seemed to move in ways that didn't make sense. I kept seeing glimpses of movement in the corner of my eyes. People I hadn't noticed before, standing too still, waiting, and then, just as I thought I might finally catch my breath, I heard it. A soft, almost inaudible whisper right outside my window. My heart stopped. Couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear, menacing, deliberate. I froze, clutching the edge of the table, my ears straining to hear more. Max growled low in his throat, his hackles raised. Something, or someone, was out there, watching, waiting. I wanted to run, to call for help, to get out of the farmhouse, but my legs wouldn't move. I stayed frozen, hoping I was imagining things, until I heard a soft thud near the barn door. My mind immediately jumped to the worst-case scenario. Someone had come here to intimidate me, more, maybe worse. I didn't know who or why, but one thing was certain. My farm was no longer mine. And I was no longer safe. And that's when I saw it. A shadow slipping behind the barn. Moving silently, carrying something long and narrow. My stomach dropped. I had no idea what it was, but I knew it couldn't be good. I could feel every muscle in my body tense up, every sense alert. I wanted to yell, to scream, to warn the people who had come here thinking this was a happy event. But I knew my voice wouldn't carry fast enough. Something told me that this night, this calm, quiet farm night, was only the beginning of a chain of events I would not be able to control. And deep down, I knew that whatever was lurking in the shadows, whatever had orchestrated the 200 invitations, was far more dangerous than I could imagine. I still remember that night like a shadow stretching over my farm, creeping into every corner, every quiet space I had once trusted. The air was cold now, sharper than before, carrying with it the smell of wet earth and hay. Max stayed close to my legs, growling low, his ears twitching at every sound. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum I couldn't stop, each beat louder than the last. I could see the faint outlines of the decorations scattered around the yard. But they no longer looked like joyful preparations. They looked like a stage set for something sinister, something I wasn't invited to understand. I crept toward the barn, trying to see who or what had moved in the shadows. The flashlight trembled in my hands, making thin streaks of light dart across the walls and floor. And then I saw it. A figure crouched low, carrying a long wrapped object I couldn't identify. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my curiosity, my need to understand, kept me frozen in place. I didn't know if this person was a thief, a prankster, or something far worse. All I knew was that they weren't supposed to be there. I whispered Max's name, hoping to draw the figure's attention, maybe scare them off. Max barked sharply, and the figure froze. I caught a glimpse of their face under a hood of face I didn't recognize. And then, just as suddenly, they disappeared behind the barn, as if swallowed by the darkness itself. My stomach twisted into knots. How had they moved so fast, so silently? And what were they carrying? I took a cautious step closer to the barn door, trying to peer inside. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this part of the wedding setup, or was it something more dangerous? I could hear faint whispers now, voices speaking in hurried tones, but I couldn't make out the words. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath, trying to listen. Each sound seemed louder than it should be: the creak of the wooden door, the rustle of the hay, the distant hoot of an owl. The quiet I had once loved on my farm was gone, replaced by a tension I couldn't escape. I decided to step back, thinking I might call the police or someone for help. But my phone was dead. I had forgotten to charge it in all the chaos. Panic set in again. I was alone on my farm, surrounded by strangers who had come for a wedding I hadn't agreed to. And now there was someone moving stealthily in the shadows, carrying something I couldn't identify. The sense of vulnerability was overwhelming. Suddenly, a sound made me jump, a soft metallic clatter from the barn. My heart stopped. Whoever was there had dropped something. I crept closer, my flashlight pointing at the spot where I had heard the noise. On the ground lay a bundle of long, thin sticks wrapped together. I bent down cautiously. They were poles, the kind used for large tents or structures. My mind raced. Were they planning to set up a massive wedding tent in the middle of my property? It made sense. But why sneak around like this? Why hide from me if it was supposed to be a surprise? I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe this was all just a badly planned surprise, a mistake that got out of control. But the whispering voices and the hooded figure told me something different. There was secrecy here. There was intention. And I had no idea who was behind it. I stepped back toward the house, my flashlight sweeping across the yard. I could see the red SUV and the other cars parked neatly near the edge of the field. The people inside seemed unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Or maybe they didn't care. They were laughing, arranging chairs, speaking excitedly about flowers and tables, completely oblivious to the tension I felt creeping through the air. I wanted to warn them, but I wasn't even sure how. My voice felt small, powerless, like a whisper that would vanish in the wind. I went inside and tried to gather my thoughts. I sat by the window, watching the barn, the yard, and the decorations. My mind replayed the events of the day over and over. How had my farm become the centerpiece of this chaotic surprise? Who had decided it was acceptable to use my address for 200 invitations? And most importantly, what was the hooded figure really doing out there? I could feel my anger building, but it was tempered with fear. This wasn't just an intrusion, it felt like a warning. Hours passed, and the darkness grew heavier, pressing down on the farm like a living thing. I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't allow it. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside made me jump. I kept imagining shadows moving behind trees, figures sneaking near the barn, and whispers drifting through the wind. Max stayed by my side, restless, as if he could sense the tension to Dot. And then, just when I thought the night couldn't get any worse, I heard a sound that froze me in my tracks, the faint laughter of a child. But there were no children supposed to be here. My heart hammered in my chest as I ran to the window. Across the yard, illuminated by the faint glow of the porch light, a small figure darted behind the decorations. I couldn't make out their face, but I could feel their eyes on me. Someone or something was playing a game. And I was the only one who didn't know the rules. I grabbed a flashlight and ran outside, my boots sinking into the damp soil. The figure had vanished. I called out, my voice echoing across the fields, but there was no answer. Only the wind, carrying the faint whispers and laughter, seemed to respond. My farm, my home, had become a place of secrets and shadows. I knew that whoever had orchestrated this wedding surprise had plans that went far beyond simple invitations. And deep down, I knew that night was only the beginning of something I couldn't yet understand, but that would change my life forever. I still remember that night, the one that made me realize my farm would never feel safe again. The darkness pressed against every corner, seeping into the barn, the fields, and even the house itself. I sat by the window, Max at my feet, his low growls vibrating against my leg. Every sound felt amplified, the rustle of leaves, the hoot of an owl. The faint crunch of gravel far away, and my imagination ran wild. That small figure I had seen earlier, the child or whatever it was, had vanished, leaving only a lingering sense that I was being watched. I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to find out who had sent the 200 invitations, why they had done it, and what everyone was planning. I grabbed a flashlight, a jacket, and my phone, even though it had barely any charge left. I stepped out into the yard, the cold night air slicing through my jacket. The decorations, the cars, and the scattered boxes now seemed sinister under the dim light. Every shadow looked like it could hide someone or something waiting to strike. I moved toward the barn, trying to be as quiet as possible. The hushed whispers I had heard before returned, drifting through the air in a way that made my heart race. I stopped, holding my breath, straining to hear. The voices were low, almost frantic, and I could make out fragments of words. Surprise! Ready? Don't tell, but it was impossible to know who was speaking or what they meant. I crouched behind the tractor, trying to get a better view. My hands were shaking, my mind spinning, but I couldn't look away. Then I saw someone step out of the shadows. It was a woman, tall, with dark hair tied back. She was carrying a clipboard and whispering into a small walkie-talkie. She glanced around nervously, then looked directly at me. For a moment, our eyes met. I felt a jolt of recognition. Or maybe it was fear. I didn't know her, but she seemed to know exactly what was going on. She nodded slightly to someone behind the barn, and a chill ran down my spine. Whatever plan was unfolding here, I was not meant to see it. I crouched lower, trying to figure out my next move. I thought about running, but where would I go? The cars were still parked near the edge of the field, and the decorations made the yard feel like a trap. The barn loomed large and dark, like a monster waiting to swallow me whole. I realized with a sinking feeling that this wasn't just about invitations or a wedding anymore. Someone had gone to great lengths to plan this. And they didn't want me to interfere. My thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise-loud crash from inside the barn. I jumped, my flashlight swinging wildly. Something heavy had fallen. I ran toward it cautiously, my boots crunching on the gravel. Inside, I could see that several tables had toppled over and a stack of chairs lay scattered across the floor. But it wasn't the furniture that made my blood run cold. It was the footprints. They weren't mine, and they weren't Max's. They were fresh. And they led toward the back of the barn, disappearing into the shadows. I followed them slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. Each step felt louder than the last, each shadow deeper and darker. And then I saw I'd tend another envelope, identical to the one I had found earlier, lying on the hay. I picked it up with trembling hands. Inside was a single piece of paper with one sentence, scrawled in messy letters. "You shouldn't have come out here alone." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Someone knew I was investigating. Someone was watching my every move. I looked around, shining my flashlight into the corners of the barn. Max growled low, and I felt a cold sweat run down my back. The farm, the place I had loved for years, had become a stage for secrets, whispers, and threats. I backed out of the barn, my mind racing. I needed to find my cousin, to find someone who could explain this madness. But as I moved toward the house, I noticed movement at the edge of the field, another shadow. Taller this time, lurking near the red SUV. My heart froze. Was it the hooded figure from before? Or someone new? Whoever it was, they didn't move like an ordinary person. They were deliberate, careful, and aware of me in a way that made my skin crawl. I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about a wedding invitation mix-up. Someone had orchestrated this entire event, and I was a key part of it, whether I wanted to be or not. My anger boiled, but it was mixed with fear. I felt trapped, surrounded by strangers, shadows, and secrets I couldn't begin to understand. And the more I tried to figure it out, the deeper I seemed to sink into a situation I wasn't prepared for. I went back inside, locking the doors behind me. My mind spun with questions, each one worse than the last. Who had done this? Why my farm? How many people were in on it? And what would happen if I tried to stop it? I could feel my chest tightening, my thoughts spiraling as I sat in the darkness, listening. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind through the trees, seemed like a warning. And then, just when I thought the night couldn't get any worse, I heard a soft knock at the door. It was slow, deliberate, almost teasing. My heart leaped into my throat. I didn't want to open it. I didn't know what or who was outside. But something inside me demanded I see. I walked toward the door slowly, each step heavier than the last. And when I reached it, I froze. On the porch, in the dim glow of the light, stood a man I had never seen before. His eyes were fixed on me, unreadable, and in his hand he held another envelope. My hands shook as I reached for it. The moment I touched the paper, a chill ran through me. I had no idea what was inside, but I knew one thing for certain. This night, this farm, and this story were far from over. I still remember that day like it was a shadow that refused to leave me. The man on the porch had vanished by the time I dared to look outside again. I held the envelope tightly, my fingers trembling, unsure whether I wanted to open it or throw it away. But curiosity got the better of me. I tore it open slowly, every second stretching longer than the last. Inside was a single sheet of paper with words scrawled in uneven handwriting. You think this is about invitations? You have no idea what's coming. Meet me at the old oak tree by midnight. Froze. The old oak tree was at the far edge of my farm, where the fields met the forest. I hadn't been near it in years. My heart raced. Who was this person? How did they know my farm so well? And why the cryptic warning? My mind spun, imagining the worst. Maybe this was a trap. Maybe this was someone warning me. Or maybe it was the beginning of something I wasn't ready for. Max whimpered at my side. He seemed to sense my fear, my hesitation. I looked at him and then at the darkening sky outside. The sun had set hours ago, and the wind carried an eerie chill. My farm, which had once felt safe and comforting, now seemed vast, cold, and full of secrets. I wanted to ignore the message, to hide inside and pretend none of this was happening. But my instincts screamed at me that I couldn't. I needed answers. I decided to wait until nightfall to go to the oak tree. Every second that passed was heavy with tension. The farm felt alive in a way I had never felt before, the creaking of the barn. The rustle of the trees, even the distant hoot of an owl, seemed like a warning. I checked the yard. The decorations were still there, the cars still parked, and yet the energy around the farm had shifted. Something had changed. The people who had been excited and cheerful before now moved quietly, almost cautiously, as if they too felt the tension I did. As midnight approached, I grabbed a flashlight and my jacket, trying to steady my shaking hands. Max followed closely, his tail down and ears alert. I stepped out into the yard, the cold air biting my skin. The decorations seemed to loom over me, the lights casting strange, shifting shadows. Each step toward the edge of the fields felt heavier. My chest ached with fear and anticipation. What was waiting for me at the oak tree? And why had someone gone to such lengths to lure me there? I reached the tree just as the moon peeked from behind a cloud, casting a silver light across the clearing. The branches twisted and swayed in the wind, like skeletal fingers pointing at me. I scanned the area with my flashlight. The clearing was empty. My heart sank. Maybe I had imagined it all. Maybe this was another cruel trick. But then I heard a whisper from behind the tree. "I knew you'd come," a voice said, low and calm. I swung the flashlight toward the sound. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was the woman I had seen near the barn days before. Her face was pale, her eyes intense. She stepped closer, and I could see the determination in her expression. "You don't understand," she said. "This isn't just about the wedding invitations. It's about something much bigger." Swallowed hard. My mind raced. "What do you mean? Who are you?" "Why my farm?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my efforts to sound strong. She looked at me, her eyes filled with urgency. "You're in danger, whether you know it or not. Those invitations. They were never meant to be delivered to friends or family. They were a distraction. And now the people behind it are watching. They're waiting." I felt my knees weaken. My farm, my home, my sanctuary Ed had become a stage for something I didn't understand. Watching. Waiting for what? I whispered. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced toward the field, where the moonlight barely illuminated the parked cars and scattered decorations. "They want to control you," she said finally. "And if they can't, they'll destroy everything you love." A shiver ran down my spine. The calm life I had known, the peaceful farm, the quiet night sit was all gone. And in its place, there was fear, mystery, and the sense that every shadow, every rustle of wind, could be hiding someone who wanted to hurt me. I wanted to ask more questions, but she held up her hand. "There's no time. You need to follow me. If we wait, it might be too late." I hesitated. My instincts screamed to run back to the farmhouse, lock the doors, and call for help. But something in her voice, the urgency, made me take a step forward. Max growled softly, as if warning me, but I motioned for him to stay close. Together, we moved toward the edge of the clearing. into the darkness beyond the familiar fields of my farm. The further we walked, the stranger everything felt. The familiar paths became unfamiliar, the shadows longer, the air thicker. I could hear the faint whispers again, carried on the wind. I didn't know if it was imagination or someone watching, but I knew one thing. I couldn't turn back. Whatever had begun with the wedding invitations was now a story I had to face, no matter the cost. And then, just as we reached the edge of the forest near the old creek, I saw it, a small glowing light in the distance. It flickered like a signal, and my heart leaped into my throat. Someone or something was waiting for us there. I didn't know who, and I didn't know what they wanted. But I had a sinking feeling that whatever was coming next would change my life forever. I still remember that night as if it had been carved into my memory forever. The glowing light ahead flickered like a distant warning, casting eerie shadows across the forest floor. Every step I took felt heavy, as if the earth itself was trying to pull me back. Max stayed close, his low growl rumbling through the quiet, warning me of things I couldn't yet see. My heart raced uncontrollably, my thoughts spinning faster than I could keep up with. I had no idea who or what was waiting for us by that light. The woman I had followed kept her eyes on the glow, moving with deliberate caution. I tried to match her pace, but my legs felt stiff, almost as if fear had frozen them. "Who are they?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She didn't answer immediately. Her face was tense, her eyes sharp, scanning every movement in the dark. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and urgent. "They're the ones who sent the invitations. They've been planning this for months. Everything you've seen on the farm. It was all meant to get you out here." Stopped in my tracks. Out here? Why? What do they want from me? My voice trembled, and I could feel panic rising like a wave ready to crash over me. She looked at me with a hard expression. "Because they need something only you have. And if they can't get it, they won't stop at anything." My stomach churned. I had no idea what she meant. My farm, my land, my life. I had always thought it was just an ordinary farm, a quiet place where I could live in peace. But apparently it was more than that. It was valuable in ways I couldn't even imagine. Every shadow around us seemed to lean closer, every whisper of the wind like a warning. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out almost everything else as we approached the light. The outline of a small clearing came into view. In the center, a figure stood waiting, partially illuminated by a lantern swinging gently from a branch. I squinted, trying to make out details. The figure was tall and thin, wearing a hooded jacket that hid most of their face. My chest tightened. Something about the way they stood calm, confident, almost menacing made my skin crawl. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The woman with me whispered, "Stay behind me." I nodded, though I wasn't sure why. My instincts screamed to run, but I couldn't. Every step forward felt like stepping deeper into a trap. The figure lifted a hand slowly, and my heart leaped into my throat. A small envelope was held out toward us. The movement was deliberate, calculated. I glanced at the woman. She shook her head slightly. "It's not what you think," she murmured. I stepped forward cautiously, my hands trembling as I reached for the envelope. When I touched it, I felt a strange vibration, almost like electricity running through the paper. My curiosity battled with fear, but I had to know what was inside. I tore it open slowly, careful not to make a sound. Inside there was a single note, short and chilling. "You were warned. Your farm, your life, and everyone you care about belong to us now. Don't make a mistake." My chest felt tight. I swallowed hard. What did that mean? Belong to them. Who were these people? And why did they know so much about me and my farm? Max growled fiercely at my side. Sensing the danger, I couldn't fully see. I could feel the hairs on my neck standing on end. This was no ordinary prank. This was something planned, precise, and terrifying. The figure turned slightly. I thought I caught a glimpse of their face beneath the hood. I couldn't tell if it was familiar or completely unknown, but the eyes were cold, unyielding. They spoke then, their voice low and almost musical in its calmness. "You don't have much time. Decide what you're willing to lose. My mind raced. Lose what? My farm, my life. Max barked sharply, and I realized that even the dog could sense the danger more clearly than I could. I wanted to run, to get back to the farmhouse, to lock every door and call for help. But I knew that wouldn't work. These people, whatever they were, had planned everything. They had orchestrated the wedding invitations, the strangers, the chaos, and the shadows. Every move I had made had been anticipated. I glanced at the woman beside me. "What do we do?" I whispered. She hesitated, then met my eyes. "We have to go deeper. There's a place on your farm you've never been, something they don't expect you to use. It's the only way to fight back, but it won't be easy." My stomach twisted. Deeper on my farm. I thought I knew every corner of it, every hidden nook and cranny. And yet her words hinted at secrets I hadn't discovered, mysteries hidden in the land I thought was mine. Fear mixed with adrenaline surged through me. I realized that this night, the invitations, the strangers, and the shadows, everything was leading me toward a truth I wasn't ready to face. And as I looked at the hooded figure standing in the glow of the lantern, I understood one terrifying thing. Nothing would ever be the same again. My farm, my sanctuary, and my life had been pulled into a story I didn't understand. And every choice I made from this moment on could change everything. I still remember that night like it never ended. The air was thick with fog as we left the clearing behind, the woman moving quickly through the trees while I tried to keep up. My boots sank into the damp soil, and every step felt heavier than the last. Max stayed close to my side, his fur brushing against my leg, his eyes darting toward every shadow. I could still feel the words from that note echoing in my mind. Your farm, your life, and everyone you care about belong to us now. It was more than a threat. It was a declaration, and I knew deep down something about my farm was tied to it all. The woman whose name I still didn't know walked with purpose. Her flashlight barely cut through the mist, but she seemed to know exactly where she was going. "Where are we headed?" I finally asked, my voice barely holding steady. She didn't look back when she answered. "To the place your grandfather built before you were born. The part of your land that was never meant to be found." Her words sent a chill racing through me. My grandfather had passed away when I was a child. He'd always been a quiet man, one who kept to himself and rarely talked about the farm's history. But I remembered one thing clearly. He had always told me never to dig near the north field. He said the ground there was restless. At the time, I thought he was just being superstitious. But now, following this strange woman toward that same direction, I felt something inside me shift. Maybe it wasn't superstition. Maybe it was a warning. We walked in silence for several minutes, the trees thinning as the fog grew lighter. The moon broke through the clouds, revealing the outline of the old north field. It hadn't been used in years. The soil was cracked and dried despite the rain earlier in the week. It was a forgotten part of the farm, one I'd avoided without really knowing why. As we stepped into the clearing, I noticed something odd. The air here felt colder, heavier. The silence was deeper too, as if the night itself was holding its breath. The woman stopped near a fallen tree and turned to me. "Your grandfather knew what was buried here," she said softly. "He tried to protect it, but they found out. That's why they want you gone. They think you'll uncover it without knowing what it is." I stared at her, confusion flooding my mind. "What are you talking about? What's buried here?" She hesitated, her eyes scanning the darkness as if expecting someone or something to appear. "Something that doesn't belong to this world," she whispered. "Something that could change everything." My pulse raced. "You're not making sense," I said, trying to steady my breathing. "I'm just a farmer. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't invite anyone here." She stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "You inherited more than land. You inherited a secret that's been kept for generations. Your family guarded it, even if you didn't know." The words hit me hard. I looked down at the soil beneath my boots, trying to imagine what could be hidden beneath it that would cause people to threaten my life. Use my address for a fake wedding and send strangers to my door. The idea felt absurd, but so did everything else that had happened. Suddenly, Max began barking furiously. His fur stood on end, his body tense, his eyes locked on something behind us. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand. At first, I saw nothing but fog and trees, but then movement. Shadows. Several figures slowly approaching through the mist. The woman cursed under her breath. They found us. I felt my throat go dry. Who? The people who sent the invites, she said. The ones who think you're standing between them and what's buried here. Panic gripped me. What do we do? She reached into her coat and pulled out a small metallic object, about the size of a coin. It glowed faintly blue in the darkness. When I say run, you've head toward that old shed on the far side of the field, she said quickly. Don't look back. Don't stop. I didn't understand what she was holding, but before I could ask, she threw it into the ground. A loud, low hum filled the air. The soil beneath our feet vibrated, and a bright light burst outward, momentarily blinding me. Max barked wildly as I stumbled back. Through the light, I could hear footsteps, heavy, closing in. The woman grabbed my arm and shouted, "Now, run!" I bolted across the field, the cold air biting at my face. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath coming in ragged bursts. Behind me, I could hear shouting, angry, desperate voices. Max ran ahead, guiding the way. The shed came into view, its wooden frame half collapsed, a relic from my grandfather's time. I pushed through the creaking door and slammed it shut behind us. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of old hay. I leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, trying to make sense of what was happening. The woman joined me moments later, her clothes torn, her face streaked with dirt. "We don't have much time," she said between breaths. "They won't stop. They'll search every inch of this place until they find it." I swallowed hard. Find what? She turned toward the back wall of the shed. "Help me move this," she said, motioning toward an old wooden cabinet. Together, we pushed it aside, revealing a square section of the floor that looked slightly different, newer wood, faintly marked with strange carvings. My hands trembled as I knelt down and brushed away the dust. "What is this?" "I asked your family's secret," she said quietly. A door to what they were trying to protect. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. My fingers found the edge of the carved panel, and with effort I lifted it. Beneath it was a dark hole, a staircase leading underground. A faint hum came from below, like machinery buried deep within the earth. I stared into the darkness, my mind spinning. "No one's been down there for decades," I whispered. She looked at me. "That's what they think. But someone has been watching, waiting for you to open it." Before I could react, a loud crash echoed from outside. The shed's door shuddered violently. Someone was trying to break in. Max barked furiously, his body positioned protectively in front of me. I could hear voices shouting orders, footsteps crunching on the gravel. The woman grabbed my arm again. "Go down the stairs. Now, but no time," she snapped. "They'll kill you if they find you." I hesitated for a second, fear paralyzing me. Then the door splintered, and I heard someone shout, "There!" Inside, that was all it took. I grabbed Max's collar and rushed down the stairs, the woman following close behind. The air grew colder and heavier the deeper we went. The sound of boots above us echoed through the walls, followed by the crack of gunfire and shouts. The stairs twisted and finally opened into a large underground chamber lit by a faint blue glow. My eyes widened as I took in the sight-rows of metal structures, strange machines, and symbols carved into the walls. The hum grew louder here, vibrating through the floor and into my bones. "What is this place?" I whispered. The woman looked around slowly. "The real reason your farm exists," she said. "This isn't just land, it's a vault. And whatever's inside it, they'll do anything to get it." I stepped forward, feeling a mix of awe and terror. Somewhere above, I could hear muffled sounds of fighting. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "We can't stay here," I said. She nodded. "No, but you need to see it first." She pointed toward the center of the chamber where a large metal pod stood upright, covered in thick cables. "That's what they want," she said softly. "That's what your grandfather tried to hide." I stared at the pod, my heart pounding. The hum so loud now it felt like the air itself was alive. "What's inside it?" She met my gaze, her voice trembling for the first time. Something that was never meant to wake up. And before I could ask what she meant, the pod began to move. The cables twitched, the hum deepened, and a long mechanical hiss filled the chamber. I stumbled back, my mind frozen in disbelief. The woman grabbed my shoulder, her eyes wide with fear. "It's too late," she whispered. "They've found us." I still remember that night, the one that felt like it had been drawn from a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The pod in the center of the chamber had begun to move, the thick cables writhing like living things. The hum intensified, vibrating through the floor and into my chest until it felt like it was trying to pull me inside. I stumbled backward, my hands shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Max growled fiercely, his hackles raised. His eyes fixed on the pod as if he could sense the danger that words couldn't describe. The woman grabbed my arm, her grip strong. "Don't look away," she warned. "You need to see this. You need to understand why they're here, why the invitations were sent, why your farm has been watched your entire life." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to take a step closer, my boots echoing in the chamber. The pod hissed again, metal grinding against metal. The cables writhed and uncoiled, revealing the top of the pod opening like a jaw ready to bite. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure the intruders outside could hear it. My stomach churned with a mix of fear and disbelief. What had my grandfather hidden here? What was so important that a mysterious group of strangers would threaten my life over it? The pod's lid slowly slid back, releasing a hiss of cold, misty air. I felt it hit my face, icy and sharp, like the breath of something not of this world. I could see movement inside the pod, a faint glow, flickering like a heartbeat. My instincts screamed to turn away, but I couldn't. The woman tightened her grip on my arm. "It's alive," she whispered. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. At first I thought it was some kind of machine, some invention my grandfather had built. But then I noticed the form inside the glow. It wasn't fully human, not fully machine. Something about it moved with awareness, responding to the light, the sound, the very presence of life in the chamber. My stomach turned as I realized this was no ordinary object. Max barked a sharp, desperate sound, and the figure inside the pod shifted, lifting a part of its form, revealing eyes or eye-like lights that glowed faintly in the mist. They were intelligent, observing, calculating. I stumbled back, my legs weak. It's alive," I whispered. The woman nodded slowly. "Your grandfather discovered it years ago, but he knew no one could control it. He hid it to protect the world. And your family. The people who sent the invitations, they want to use it. They want its power." Shook my head, unable to comprehend. "Power? What kind of power?" She stepped closer to the pod, her face tense. "It can control life. Energy, even minds. It's beyond anything you can imagine. That's why they're willing to kill to get it. That's why your farm was chosen. They knew you'd inherit it, and, eventually, this chamber." A cold shiver ran down my spine. The invitations, the strangers, the shadows, the strange figures in the forest, they had all been orchestrated to push me toward this moment. Everything I had experienced over the past days was part of a plan I had been dragged into. And now the consequences were right in front of me. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the chamber. Someone had broken through the shed above. The intruders were here, and I could hear their heavy boots pounding on the floor, their shouts urgent, angry, determined. My pulse raced. If they reached the pod before I understood it, before I could protect it, I couldn't even imagine what would happen. The woman grabbed my hand. "We have to move it. Now. Move it." "How?" I stammered, panic rising. "There's a secondary chamber beneath this one. It's hidden. Your grandfather made it in case of emergencies. We can seal it there, keep it safe until we figure out what to do." I nodded, terrified, but knowing she was right. Together, We worked quickly, lifting the pod with a mixture of adrenaline and fear. Max growled at every sound from above, his body tense and ready to defend us. The air was thick, mist swirling around the pod, and the glow inside pulsed like a heartbeat, casting shadows that danced across the walls. We reached the hidden chamber, a narrow tunnel beneath the floor. The woman pushed the pod forward, sliding it into the dark passage. I could feel its energy, its awareness, even as it moved beneath my hands. Something about it was alive in a way I couldn't describe. The hum of its power grew stronger as it entered the secondary chamber, and I felt a strange pull, as if it was trying to communicate. The moment it was sealed inside, the noise above intensified. The intruders were breaking through the walls, trying to reach us. I could hear shouts, breaking wood, and the scrape of metal. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding. But I knew one thing for certain: if they found the pod, the world as I knew it would end. The woman looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and determination. "You have to stay hidden," she said. "They won't leave until they find you, too. But the pod, for now, it's safe." I nodded, my mind spinning. My farm had been more than just land. It had been a vault, a hiding place, a battleground I never signed up for. And now, after everything, the invitations, the strangers, the shadows, I realized my life had changed forever. Nothing would ever be the same again. Max leaned against me, still growling, still alert. I could feel the tension in his body and in mine. The chamber was dark, the hum of the pod lingering faintly through the walls. A reminder that whatever we had protected tonight was alive and waiting. I swallowed hard and whispered to the woman, "What happens now?" She looked at me gravely. "Now we wait. But this is only the beginning. They will not stop, and neither can you. Your life, your farm, and everything you care about. It's all a part of this story now. You can't turn back." And as I sat there in the cold underground chamber, listening to the distant sounds of chaos above, I realized the truth. My farm had been a secret battlefield long before I even knew it existed. And the people who wanted the pod would never stop until they got it. The night stretched on, thick with danger, mystery, and the unknown. I still remember that night like a storm that never ended. The chamber was silent now, but the air felt heavy, tense, like the calm before an unimaginable chaos. Max lay at my feet, ears perked, growling softly at shadows that seemed to move on their own. The hum of the pod, faint but persistent, vibrated through the floor. I could feel it in my bones, a heartbeat that belonged to something far older and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. The woman whispered beside me, her voice barely audible, "We don't have much time. They'll find us if we wait too long." I nodded, trying to steady my shaking hands. "How do we stop them?" She shook her head. "We don't, not entirely. We can only protect it. For now. And hope they don't discover the secondary chamber." Swallowed hard. My mind raced, thinking of the chaos above, the intruders. The 200 wedding invitations that had been nothing but a lure. Every person who had come near my farm in the past weeks, every strange figure in the fields or shadows, had been part of a plan I didn't even know existed. And now everything had led to this moment. Me, hiding in the underground chamber, protecting something I barely understood. Suddenly, a distant crash echoed through the earth above. My heart skipped a beat. Someone was searching. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. Max growled, low and menacing, as if warning the intruders that we were not alone. My chest ached, my stomach twisted, but there was no time to panic. We had to act. The woman moved toward the tunnel entrance, peering into the darkness above. "They've split up," she whispered. "Some are searching the farm. Others are checking the sheds and buildings. If we're lucky, they won't think to look underground." I swallowed, trying to steady my breath. "Lucky," I echoed. "We're just hiding here." "How is this luck?" Her eyes softened briefly. "Because hiding is all we can do right now. And because the pod isn't ready to be found? Not yet." I felt a cold wave of fear wash over me. not ready to be found? That meant they could find it eventually. And when they did, nothing would stop them. The stakes were higher than anything I had ever imagined. My farm, my life, everything I loved. It was all at risk. I pressed my ear to the floor, trying to listen. Faint footsteps above, muffled voices calling out. "Check the north field." Someone shouted. My heart raced. The north field, the very area where the pod had been hidden, was being searched. My hands clenched into fists. I had to do something, but what? I didn't even know what the intruders looked like, who they were, or how many of them there were. Max growled again, and I noticed his eyes fixed on the far corner of the chamber. At first, I saw nothing. Then a small panel in the wall shifted slightly, as if pushed by something unseen. My stomach dropped. "What is that?" I whispered. The woman's eyes widened. They've found the entrance to a secondary passage. Someone knows we're here. Panic surged through me, and my thoughts raced. Could they have been watching all along? Had they known the pod's location all this time, waiting for the right moment? The answer seemed obvious and terrifying. Suddenly, a faint light appeared at the far end of the chamber. A flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. My blood ran cold. They were coming. Max barked furiously, and I backed up instinctively. My hands shook, my mind struggling to process the reality of the situation. My farm had been my sanctuary, my home. And now it was a trap. Every corner, every shadow. Every familiar place felt alien and dangerous. The woman grabbed my hand and pulled me toward a hidden side passage I hadn't noticed before. "This way," she whispered urgently. "We can't fight them here. We have to move the pod further down." I followed, my legs trembling, Max close behind. The side passage was narrow, twisting, and steep. The hum of the pod grew louder, almost screaming now, as if aware of the approaching danger. I felt a strange connection to it, a mixture of fear and fascination. Whatever this thing was, it was alive in a way that I couldn't explain. We reached a small chamber further underground. The walls were lined with old metal reinforcements, and the floor had strange symbols carved into it, faintly glowing. The woman pushed the pod into the center. "This should hold." "For now," she said, her voice tense. "But we don't have much time. They'll be here soon." I sank to the floor, trying to catch my breath. "How do we stop them?" I whispered, just she shook her head. "We don't. We protect it. And hope we survive long enough for help to arrive, or for you to understand what your grandfather left for you." A cold wind blew through the passage, carrying distant sounds of shouts, breaking wood, and pounding footsteps. The intruders were close, too close. My heart pounded like a drum. I realized then that my life, my farm, everything I had ever known, had been drawn into something far beyond my understanding. And I was at the center of it all. Max nudged my hand, growling low. I reached down to calm him, but my eyes never left the passage entrance. Every shadow, every sound, every movement could mean the difference between life and death. And then, from the darkness above, a voice called out sharp, commanding, and terrifyingly familiar. "Don't think you can hide from us forever." My stomach dropped. They had found us. They knew we were here. I still remember that night like the longest night of my life, stretching endlessly as if time itself had stopped. The intruders were above, their voices echoing through the farm, the sheds, the north field, and down into the tunnels beneath my feet. Every shout, every stomp, every clatter made my heart pound faster, my stomach twist, my mind reel. Max pressed close to me, growling low, his eyes flashing in the dim light of the underground chamber. I could feel the pod humming, alive and aware, almost like it was trembling with anticipation or fear. The woman beside me whispered, "They're coming. We have to prepare." I swallowed hard. Prepare how? We can't fight them. There are too many. She shook her head. You don't fight them. You protect it. You survive. My hands trembled as I tried to steady myself. The air in the chamber was thick with tension, and every shadow seemed to move on its own. The hum of the pod had grown louder, pulsing like a heartbeat in sync with mine. I realized then that whatever was inside that pod, whatever my grandfather had hidden it, wasn't just important. It was alive. It understood. And somehow I felt it was aware of us. Suddenly, the ground above shook violently. A loud crash echoed through the chamber. The intruders had broken through the tunnel entrance above. My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. The moment we had been dreading. I gripped Max's collar and pressed myself against the wall. Listening to the boots pounding closer, the voices shouting commands. Then, a single voice cut through the chaos, cold and familiar. They're here. Fear surged through me. My farm, my home, my life had been transformed into a battlefield, and I was trapped at the center of it. The woman grabbed my hand again, her eyes wide with urgency. "We have to move," she shouted. I followed her into a side passage, deeper into the tunnels. But the intruders were relentless. Their boots pounded, their shouts grew louder. And I could hear the scraping of metal as they tried to force their way through every barrier. Max growled fiercely, standing protectively in front of me. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, a mix of terror and determination. I wouldn't let them take this knot without a fight. We reached a smaller chamber, one I had never seen before. Strange carvings lined the walls, glowing faintly in the darkness. The woman guided the pod into the center, positioning it carefully. "This should hold them off, at least for a little while," she said. I pressed my hands against the pod, feeling the energy vibrating through it. The hum had changed, almost like a song, low and resonant, filling the chamber with a strange warmth, despite the fear gripping my heart. I realized then that my grandfather hadn't just hidden the pod, he had trusted me to protect it, to keep it safe until the right moment. Suddenly, a loud crash above made the walls tremble. Dust rained down, and I heard the intruders breaking through. Max barked, his growl echoing through the chamber. I felt my knees weaken, fear threatening to paralyze me. But then the woman whispered, "It's time." I looked at her, confusion and fear in my eyes. "Time for what?" She pointed to the pod. "It's alive. It can protect itself and us. You just have to let it." I hesitated, my hands hovering over the smooth metal surface. The hum intensified, almost like it was urging me. I took a deep breath and pressed my hands firmly against it. The energy surged through me, warm and powerful, filling every corner of my being. Max whimpered but stayed close. The chamber began to glow with a blue light, the symbols on the walls shining brighter dot above. The intruders shouted and hammered at the walls, but then I felt the pod responding. A pulse of energy shot through the floor, vibrating through the walls, through the tunnels. The ground shook violently, and the intruders' voices became distorted, panicked. Their tools clattered to the floor. I could hear screams, but the sound seemed far away, muffled, as if the pod had created a barrier between us and them. The woman's eyes widened. "It's working," she shouted. I didn't understand how, but I could feel it. The pod's energy was protecting us, shielding us from the danger above. The intruders pounded and shouted, but their movements became slower, weaker. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, and then a shockwave rippled through the chamber. The intruders' voices were gone. Silence fell, heavy and complete. I sank to the floor, exhausted, trembling with relief and disbelief. Max licked my hand, and I realized for the first time that we were safe at least for now. The woman sat beside me, her face pale but relieved. "You did it," she whispered. "You protected it. Your grandfather would be proud." I stared at the pod, still glowing faintly. I had no idea what it truly was, or what it could do. But I knew one thing. My farm, my home, my life would never be ordinary again. The invitations, the strangers, the danger had all led to this moment. And somehow I had survived. We stayed in the chamber until the first light of dawn, listening to the silence above. The intruders were gone, at least for now. My mind raced with questions, fears, and a strange sense of awe. Whatever the pod was, it had chosen me to protect it, and I knew my life would never be the same. Finally, the woman looked at me and said, "You need to understand one thing. This is only the beginning. They will return. But now you know the truth and you have the power to protect it." I nodded, swallowing hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. My farm, my life, and everything I had known had been transformed into a secret battlefield. But for the first time, I felt ready. I would protect it. I would survive. And as the sun rose over my farm, casting light over the fields, the barns, and the north field, I realized that the quiet life I had taken for granted was gone forever. The farm was mine, but it was also something more, a place of secrets, power, and danger. And I was its guardian. I looked at Max, who wagged his tail weakly but faithfully. I took a deep breath and whispered to him, "We did it, buddy. We survived the night. 'Kay?" And in that moment, I understood that life would never be ordinary again, but I was ready for whatever came next. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear what you think about the secrets of the farm and what you imagine might happen next.